Well, welcome you all. We shall be talking about stellar structure. The issues before us are how to study the stellar structure. Let's be clear of one thing. First of all, when we say stellar structure, what we mean is the variation of temperature inside the star, variation of density inside the star, and variation of pressure inside the star. Now you all know that stars are very far from us, they're very hot, and they're very massive bodies. They obviously cannot be brought to laboratories to experiment. So what do? Then what we do is to make models. We make some assumptions to start with and calculate the consequences of these assumptions as predictions and match these predictions with observations. If they match, fine. If they don't, then we change some of the assumptions and go back to our calculations, match them once again with observations and see if they agree. So it is this process of continuous changes in modeling and continuous checking with observations that finally gives us a stellar model. And you will be surprised to know that this process is extremely fruitful. We know about stars a great deal. It just is because of this process of modeling. Let us see the HR diagram. This diagram you have seen earlier also. You see the main sequence going from the right bottom to the left top, and you see the various categories of stars. On the top you have supergiants. Between the supergiants and the main sequence you have giants, and below the main sequence are white dwarfs. And the study of stellar structure and stellar evolution should tell us how stars travel from one branch of HR diagram to another branch of HR diagram. The stellar structure mainly concerns with the stars on the main sequence, and the evolution concerns mainly with the travel from the main sequence to giant, supergiant, and maybe ultimately to white dwarfs. So HR diagram obviously is a very important tool for the study of stellar structure and stellar evolution. To start with, we are just showing you the structure of the sun. You see in the core, you see this where the energy is produced at the core, and you see this white patch. This energy is being produced at the core, and this has to travel to the surface. And obviously, if it has to travel to the surface, there must be a temperature gradient, and we shall see what kind of temperature gradient we get when the energy travels either by radiation or by convection. Sun is the nearest star to us. We can study this in great details, and all our theories therefore must first of all be tested on the sun. If they are all right, then we go to other stars. So sun obviously is very important to us. And this slide shows you the physical principles which we use to study the internal structure of stars. First is hydrostatic equilibrium. We shall explain them one by one, Virial theorem, and then energy generation, and lastly the energy transport from the core to the surface. You see, you must remember that there are only two things which determine the hydrostatic equilibrium of a star. The gravity, shown in red lines here, pressing the matter inwards, and the pressure, shown in green lines, which is acting outwards. And when these two forces of gravity and pressure, they are equal, then the star is in equilibrium. And here we show in a little more detail. You have a small element of matter whose volume is dV, and therefore its mass is equal to dV times d rho, if it's not shown here, and the pressure difference on this is dP by dr, and the force acting on this is dP times dA, and this force must be balanced by the force of gravity, and you know that the force of gravity is exerted by the mass inside this radius where this little element is situated. When these two forces are equal, we have hydrostatic equilibrium. In terms of mathematics, the equation is dP by dr, that is pressure gradient, is equal to minus gmr by r squared times rho r. This minus sign is because the two forces must be equal and opposite. And rho r is the density and mr is the mass inside a sphere of radius r. We shall see that the equation of continuity of mass uses this mr. So it is dmr by dr equal to 4 pi r squared times rho r. If you take dr on the other side, you will get 4 pi rho r squared dr times 4 pi r squared times dr times rho r, which is nothing but the mass in the shell of width dr. First of all, let us look at the virial theorem. Virial theorem has been referred to earlier also, but let us use the virial theorem here. Virial theorem simply says that twice the kinetic energy plus the potential energy, the sum of these two must be equal to 0. So it's a relation between kinetic energy and the potential energy, and the theorem essentially says that the two must be of the same order. And using this and putting kinetic energy and potential energy in terms of mass and temperature, etc., you get this relation. The average temperature is proportional to the mass to the power 2 by 3 into the average density raised to power 1 by 3. And you see also that the temperature, average temperature, is proportional to the mass to the power 2 by 3. So higher the mass of the star, higher is the average temperature in the star. So more massive stars are hotter stars. So we show you sun once again, and if you use this virial theorem, then the mean temperature inside the sun we find is roughly 4 million degrees Kelvin. This is not the exact is 15 million degrees Kelvin, but it's an important thing that we get that this is of the order of millions of degrees. So when we make our assumptions, we must be aware of the fact that we are dealing with a very hot body. This is the importance. The surface temperature of the sun, as we shall see later also, is about 6000 degrees Kelvin. Well, this again shows the structure. We have a core where the energy is produced, and then this energy is transmitted to the surface, cooler surface. You see, remember that there are only 3 types of processes which can serve the energy processes in stars. These are the gravitational, chemical, and nuclear. Chemical can be easily ruled out. If you, even a simple calculation will show that chemical energy is not sufficient. You see, there is one important thing that you must remember. That is, whatever this source not only produce very high amounts of energies, but also must last for billions of years, because the life of a star like the sun is billions of years, and therefore whatever energy source is there must last us that long. And chemical energy doesn't fit the bill. And gravitational energy also, you will find, gives a lot of energy, but for a shorter duration, and therefore gravitational energy is important in astrophysics, but only for shorter duration. Nuclear energy is the only source left for producing energy in the stars. And as you know from elementary classes, you know that nuclear energy can be of 2 types. It can be fusion, it can be fission. And all this is decided by the binding energy. You must be familiar with this binding energy curve. You know that when the atomic, on this side, on the left side, we have the y-axis, we have the energy per nucleon, binding energy per nucleon, and it is increasing. This means that smaller particles can be combined. For example, hydrogen can be combined with hydrogen, or hydrogen can be combined with helium, and so on. That means smaller particles can be combined and energy can be produced, because they result in the increasing binding energy per nucleon. On the other side, if you go to the extreme right, again the binding energy increases if we go towards smaller particles. So Larger particles break into smaller particles to give us energy by fission. Smaller particles combine, called fusion, to give us energy. And inside the stars, it is a fusion that does the job. And obviously, you would ask this question, how can a proton combine with a proton? Because the two are both positively charged particles and they both repel each other. Well, absolutely, you are right. So, when two protons come towards each other, they have to overcome a very high Coulomb barrier. And therefore, only when the temperatures inside the stars are extremely high, that the two protons can really overcome this Coulomb barrier and combine, fall in the region R shown here. And actually, it is not proton-proton that combine. Actually, there is a complete cycle. Two protons combine, as shown here in this slide, to produce deuterium and giving energy. Deuterium combines with another proton to give us helium-3 and energy. And then two helium-3 particles or nuclei combine to give us helium-4, letting out two protons and giving lot of energy. So it is this which is called proton-proton cycle. And you see, the net result is that 4 protons have combined into one helium nucleus. The mass of 4 protons is slightly larger than the mass of helium, and this difference in energy gives us the energy as shown here in these brackets. This is another way to show the same thing. You have two parallel cycles going on. The proton combines with one proton, gives rise to deuterium, which takes another proton, goes to helium-3, and two helium-3 particles combine to give us helium-4, and they release two protons. You will see the same thing. The protons coming near each other. Here you see that. And then you can see how the two helium-3 combine to form one helium-4 and two protons are set free. Whole process is shown here in this. You see, two helium-3 are coming together, they collide, and two protons are set free and a helium is formed. And this is the formation of helium from 4 protons that is the source of energy for the stars. There is another process also called the carbon-nitrogen cycle. We told you earlier that more massive the star, hotter it is, and if the temperature is high inside a star, then this carbon-nitrogen cycle also gives us energy. For this we require some carbon to be present to begin with, and then carbon-12 takes a proton, goes to nitrogen-13, nitrogen-13 decays to carbon-13, which takes another proton, becomes nitrogen-14, which takes another proton, becomes oxygen-15, and oxygen-15 decays into nitrogen-15 and takes another proton and gives us helium-4 and carbon. Essentially here also you would notice that 4 protons combine into one helium. Carbon is set free again. Although we require carbon to begin the cycle, here shown in the cyclic form, you see, if you go in the clockwise direction, you see that what's happening. Carbon going into nitrogen, nitrogen going into carbon again 13, then going to nitrogen 14, then going to oxygen 15 and going to nitrogen 15 and ultimately coming back to carbon and formation of one helium nucleus. So 4 protons have again combined to form one helium nucleus. Carbon is there only to assist the nuclear reactions. You know from elementary physics, which you studied in school, that there are 3 processes for energy transfer: conduction, radiation and convection. And we shall show you small animations how conduction, radiation and convection work, and then we'll explain how the energy is transported from the core of the star to the surface. Let us look at these animations. You see here a spoon conducts energy to the hand, And if you have done this kind of thing, your hand starts burning. This is very familiar process to you. Here it is radiation. You see the flame of the candle is emitting energy on all sides, in all directions. This is radiation. This you must have seen in your 9th or 10th class, some experiment. You have water in the beaker and it is being heated by a pointed source of heat, and you will see convection cells in the beaker being formed. And if you have some colored thing, you see very beautiful cells, convection cells. This is the process of convection. In the context of stars, conduction doesn't take place. It takes place only in compact stars. I think when you do that, then you'll be told that conduction is important only in compact stars, very dense stars. For normal stars, we have only two processes, radiation and convection. In the core, where the energy is produced, as you see in this slide, the energy it produces a very high temperature in the core. As we told you earlier, the temperature in the sun is of the order of 15 million degrees Kelvin in the core. And from the core, these high energy photons start traveling to the surface. On the way, they collide with matter and they are re-emitted, and ultimately at each collision they are weakened. Their energy is decreased, and therefore when they reach the surface of the star, the temperature at the surface is only 6,000 degrees in the case of the sun. It's very interesting, this fact. As I told you, that high energy photons travel from the core and they collide with matter, and when they are re-radiated, they can be re-radiated in any other direction. So the process is a random walk kind of thing from the core to the surface of the star. And this process could take, in the case of the sun for example, as much as some 10 to the power 5 or 10 to the power 6 years, a million years, for a photon to travel from the core to the surface. And the interesting thing is this: if today for some reason the sun goes on strike, stops producing energy, we would know of this only in a million years. So that's the important thing. Now, we have said that the energy is transported from the core to the surface. If the energy is to be transported, obviously we need a temperature gradient. And if the energy is being transmitted by radiation, then we have what is known as radiative temperature gradient, and it is given by this formula. In this case, let me explain to you symbols. These are some new symbols here. One is Kr or kappa r, that is the absorption coefficient, and another is Lr. Lr is the luminosity inside the sphere of radius r. And this A is of course the constant, Stephan's constant, C is the speed of light, and T is of course the temperature. So you know all the symbols. Let us see the temperature gradient for adiabatic process. Well, again from your high school physics, you must be familiar with the adiabatic process. Adiabatic process is the process in which there is no energy exchange. There is no energy exchange between the inside and outside. And the adiabatic, you must also have derived this relation in the adiabatic process. The temperature gradient is given by gamma minus 1 by gamma into T by P, dP by dr. Gamma is the ratio of the specific heats at constant pressure and constant volume. This must be familiar to you. Let us look at this slide first of all. It says that if the actual temperature gradient inside is greater than the adiabatic temperature gradient inside, then the convective transport of energy takes over. That is, in the region where this inequality is satisfied, the energy is transported by convection. We have been telling you all along that a temperature gradient is essential for transport of energy from the core to the surface. This temperature gradient inside the core is determined by the energy production process. And as the energy is filtered from the core to the surface, goes from the core to the surface, we have established a temperature gradient. This temperature gradient is radiative temperature gradient if the process of transfer of energy is radiative. Now, which one dominates over the other in which region of the star? That is the question. And the answer is that if in a certain region of the star the established temperature gradient is higher or greater than the adiabatic temperature gradient, then the energy is transported by convection. If it is lesser, smaller than the adiabatic temperature gradient, then the energy is transmitted by radiation. So this equation is important. If the actual temperature gradient, let me repeat, is greater than the adiabatic temperature gradient, then the energy is transported by convection. If the inequality is the other way around, then the energy is transported by radiation. The more massive a star, hotter it is from inside. That means the energy production process also is such that it produces very large quantities of heat inside the star, and therefore at the core of the star the temperature gradient that is established is greater than the adiabatic temperature gradient, and therefore the energy in the core is transported by convection. Now, in the more massive stars, in sun-like stars shown in the middle, in the core the temperature gradient is not sufficiently higher than the adiabatic temperature gradient. It's not higher in fact, and therefore the energy is transported for the most part by radiation. It's only in the surface layers of such stars that convection becomes possible. And in very low mass stars, it is again the convection throughout. In the sun-like stars you saw a shell. In the stars which have very low mass, this shell becomes the whole star. So throughout the star we have only convective process. In normal stars it is radiation and convection. As shown here, this is a sun-like star again. We have a core in which energy is produced. It is transported by radiation to a shell, a very small shell, very small thickness, and it is in this shell that convection takes place, and the energy is transported from the bottom of the shell to the top of the shell, which is the surface of the star. In more massive stars, we have cores in which energy is transported by convection, then the shell in which energy is transported by radiation to the surface. There is no way we can touch the stars, there is no way we can look inside what is happening, so we have to build models. We are forced in fact to build models, and these models are based on very elementary physical principles of mechanics, principles of thermodynamics and so on, which you know already. And as I told you, these are the 4 or 5 items listed here. Hydrostatic equilibrium, that is the equilibrium between the forces of gravity and pressure. Then of course we need equation of state for the stellar matter. If it's a perfect gas, then you know it is like PV equal to RT or something. And we also need to know mechanisms of stellar energy generation, and we have just told you that in the case of stars it is nuclear energy that is produced in the core. And then we need also the modes of energy transport in the stellar interior, and in the sun-like stars the mode in 70% of the star is radiation, and for the shell it is the convection. For very massive stars we have the cores in which energy is transmitted by convection, and for the rest of the star it is by radiation. And let me also tell you one thing, let me repeat in fact, that model building is a very successful process as far as astrophysics goes. We know much more about stars than about many other things which are very near to us, or even in our laboratories. And all that has been accomplished by simple physical principles and a little mathematics. we showed you the HR diagram. You see, on the HR diagram, you have different regions. And one of the important tasks of stellar structure studies is to tell us where a particular star can be found, whether it is a main sequence star, whether it is a giant star, whether it is a white dwarf, and it should not be found anywhere in the gaps. And you can see this is the if you see the actual HR diagram and our model HR diagram, then you would see that the two fit very well. Most of the stars are found to be on the main sequence, some giants, some supergiants, some white dwarfs, and no stars in the gap. That's very important, and that shows us how valid our models are. In fact, there are very few observational parameters. One is the luminosity, the other is the temperature, and therefore the spectrum. And these are the two things which are checked against the predictions of the models that we build. And in this slide, you see the internal structure of the sun. All of it has come from the model building. You can see, you know that we can't see inside, and they turn out to be very, very accurate. So we have a core which is at a temperature of about 15 million degrees, and then we have various shells, and then we have at the top the in this case we have shown the atmosphere of the sun also. At the top, this yellow layer is corona, and these brown layers are the internal layers in the sun.